Hello, and welcome to Environment and Climate Change Canada's information session on the petroleum refining reporting requirements. These requirements are applicable to those facilities subject to the Greenhouse Gas Reporting Program's expanded reporting requirements for 2019, which includes petroleum refineries. We'll begin the session by introducing the expansion of the GHGRP and the petroleum refinery requirements. We'll then explore the specific petroleum refinery reporting and quantification requirements. Finally, we'll discuss some common reporting issues, and then we'll wrap up by describing the resources available to help reporters. Here's a quick summary of the GHGRP and its recent expansion. Greenhouse Gas Reporting Program administers the annual mandatory reporting of greenhouse gas emissions by facilities under the authority of Section 46 of the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. In 2017, Phase 1 of the GHGRP expansion was implemented, followed by Phase 2 in 2018. The expansion resulted in a lowered reporting threshold and additional reporting requirements for specific sectors and facility activities. The reporting threshold is now 10 kilotons in carbon dioxide equivalent units, except for CCTS facilities where those activities must be reported regardless of emissions. Additional sector-specific and fuel combustion reporting requirements, including prescribed quantification methods, are included for aluminum, ammonia, base metals, cement, electricity heat, ethanol, hydrogen, iron steel, lime, mining, nitric acid, petroleum refining, and pulp and paper sectors. The reporting requirements are published in the 2019 GHGRP notice. A link to the notice may be found at our website. Schedules 7, 15, and 16 of the 2019 GHGRP notice apply to petroleum refineries. For petroleum refineries, there are a number of activities that produce emissions, so we've organized the reporting and quantification in a manner that distinguishes between these activities. Methods to calculate emissions from specific refining activities are provided in Section 11 of the Quantification Requirements document. We'll briefly touch on each of these activities over the next several slides. Before moving on, I should also mention that fuel combustion and flaring, as well as hydrogen production, are not included in the activities covered under the Petroleum Refineries Reporting Schedule 16. These are included as their own activities under Schedules 7 and 15 of the 2019 GHGRP notice, and Sections 2 and 10 of Canada's Greenhouse Gas Quantification Requirements document. Combustion and flaring must be reported, and if hydrogen production is occurring at the refinery, you must report that as well. For catalyst regeneration, the GHGRP requires the reporting of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide emissions. For CO2 emissions, there are several quantification methods available, depending on whether regeneration is continuous or periodic and whether taking place in fluid catalytic cracking units, cokers, or other operations. The methods take into account factors such as exhaust gas flow rate and concentration, carbon content of the coke burned, and the regeneration rate. For methane and nitrous oxide, default emission factors are provided. Methods are also available to calculate emissions for process vents. Note that these methods are also applicable to asphalt production and uncontrolled blowdown systems. For process vents, you're required to report CO2, CH4, and N2O emissions. Quantification considers average flow rate, fraction of gas, and duration and number of venting events. Note as well, as discussed earlier for hydrogen production emissions, petroleum refineries are required to follow Schedule 15 of the notice and Section 10 of the Quantification Requirements document. As mentioned, for asphalt production emissions, the process vent methodology is also applicable. There is also an alternative methodology provided that uses the quantity of asphalt blown and relevant emission factors to calculate emissions. For those producing asphalt, you're required to report carbon dioxide and methane emissions. For sulfur recovery units, CO2 emissions have to be reported. These are quantified using the flow rate of acid gas and the molar fraction of carbon dioxide in sour gas. If the molar fraction used is source-specific, the methodology for obtaining this must be documented and reported. For storage tanks, methane leakage emissions have to be reported. There are exclusions, however, depending on the type of tank. Units permanently attached to conveyances, pressure vessels, sumps, vessels storing wastewater, and reactor vessels are excluded from reporting under this category. Methodologies for quantifying emissions use factors such as methane composition data, emission factors, quantity of crude oil, and pressure differential. These methodologies are also applicable to calculating leakage emissions from loading operations. For industrial wastewater treatment, petroleum refineries are required to report CH4 and N2O emissions. Quantification of methane emissions considers the quantity of wastewater treated, the chemical or biochemical oxygen demand, methane generation capacity, and methane correction factor. The methane correction factor is based on the treatment type. For example, the methane correction factor for aerobic treatment that is well maintained is 0, which results in an estimate of 0 methane emissions for treatment. Quantification of nitrous oxide emissions considers the quantity of wastewater treated and the nitrogen content in the influent wastewater stream. For oil water separators, facilities must report methane emissions, which are quantified using the quantity of wastewater treated, the type of separator, and an emission factor. Facilities must report methane emissions for equipment leaks as well. These are quantified using process-specific methane composition data and an EPA protocol for estimating leakage emissions. If this isn't possible, another methodology is provided that uses emission factors and considers the quantities and types of equipment used. For coke calcining units, you're required to report CO2, CH4, and N2O emissions. A mass balance approach is used for quantifying carbon dioxide emissions, and default emission factors are used to quantify methane and nitrous oxide emissions. For delayed coking units, reporting of methane emissions is required. These are to be quantified using the number and dimensions of coke vessels, pressure, fraction of methane, and also considers whether water or steam have been added to the vessel after venting. There are also some additional reporting requirements for petroleum refineries. These include the quantities and properties of refinery inputs, including crude oil, ethanol, propane, and butane. Note, however, that the measurement and sampling requirements provided in the quantification requirements document are not intended to apply to these additional reporting requirements. These may be reported as they are typically measured or sampled at the facility. Facilities must also report quantities of any other feedstock by feedstock type. Facilities that are subject to the Federal Output-Based Pricing System regulations may be aware that there are required methods to follow for quantifying emissions to be reported in the OBPS annual report. These methods are also allowable for your GHGRP report. Please note that the OBPS regulations refer to the GHGRP's 2017 methods for quantifying fuel combustion emissions. In the GHGRP reporting module, there's a section where you must indicate if you're using these methods for your GHGRP report. If you select yes for this option, the methodologies that you can select on the subsequent screens no longer refer to the 2019 GHGRP methods. They refer either to the 2017 GHGRP methods or other applicable OBPS methodologies. Note that it is not mandatory to use the OBPS required quantification methodologies for reporting to the GHGRP. It is an option for those facilities subject to the OBPS regulations. Further, in the OBPS reporting system, there is a function provided that will generate an OBPS to GHGRP printout based on the emissions you are reporting in the annual OBPS report. This is not intended for facilities that are subject to expanded GHGRP requirements. In the GHGRP report, after reporting the detailed information for each applicable activity, there is a function that automatically populates the total emissions categories based on the previous emissions information provided. Therefore, there is no need to use the printout. For the purpose of integrating facility-reported data directly in national-level GHG reporting, for example in the National Inventory Report for Canada, the emissions data reported by facilities to the GHGRP need to be fully supported by the estimation details provided in the report. While there are no specific reporting issues to mention, we would simply like to reiterate that refineries are subject to fuel combustion and flaring reporting requirements contained in Schedule 7 of the notice and following methods outlined in Chapter 2 of the Quantification Requirements document. Please review the video tutorial describing the fuel combustion requirements as well as the overall expanded requirements video tutorial which discusses common reporting issues for all sectors. To wrap up, this slide lists the resources available to help facilities in completing their GHGRP report. Our website listed here is the place to go, where you can find a link to the 2019 GHGRP notice, which describes the latest reporting requirements. Also included on our website is a link to the Greenhouse Gas Quantification Requirements document, which is mandatory for those subject to the expansion. You'll also find the technical guidance document on reporting greenhouse gas emissions. This helps to explain the notice and specific technical requirements. You'll also find a link to access the single window system and the following guidance on using this online system to submit your report. There's swim guidance, including video tutorials on accessing single window for the first time, connecting your profile to an organization, and managing organization information. We also provide enhanced step-by-step instructions on submitting a greenhouse gas report. There's also a page dedicated to more commonly asked questions and answers, and of course you can contact the GHG Help Desk with any questions you may have. And new this year are a series of video tutorials available on YouTube to help explain the requirements, common reporting issues, and how to prepare your GHGRP report. Finally, here's how you can reach the GHGRP. Please do not hesitate to contact us if you have any questions, and also have a look at all the resources available to you. We encourage you to check out the additional recordings available, including information sessions on the general reporting requirements applicable to all facilities, and an overall look at the expanded reporting requirements, which discusses some common reporting issues. Please also review any of the relevant single window demonstration videos. Thank you.